My name is Dana Catherine Scully. I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a career I chose after medical school, which promised a chance to further my aim as a scientist and as a seeker of justice in a science-based world. Soon after joining the FBI, I was asked to review the work of a fellow agent, Fox Mulder, and to debunk the X-Files, cases involving what my superiors regarded as science fiction and a waste of resources. I quickly came to understand Mulder's work on the paranormal wasn't such as I'd been led to believe, that the X-Files were worthy of Mulder's investigations and of mine, that a world existed on the far fringes of accepted science, a world where a scientist would have her strongly held beliefs tested and retested. I would also come to fear that the institution I joined and invested with my trust was subject to the influence of dark forces outside the Bureau and sometimes within. Forces threatened by Mulder's work and increasingly by mine. Shortly after sensing these threats, I was abducted from my home by unknown assailants and returned without a clear understanding why. But intervening incidents have led me to believe that during my short disappearance, I was subjected to tests resulting in a life-threatening disease. Its cure as mysterious as the illness itself. Tests which I now suspect are part of a larger conspiracy. A conspiracy of men hiding science for almost 60 years. Secrets kept from the American people by a self-interested cabal intent on the consolidation of power both at home and on a perilously global scale. But questions remain unanswered about their motives and their final objectives. When and where these men might play out their dark plans. And the significance of a recent test result of my personal genetic makeup, turning up DNA anomalies that I can only classify as alien.
It'll probably start on a Friday. What will seem like an attack on America by terrorists or Russia. Driven by a well-oiled, well-armed, and multinational group of elites using alien technology that government's been hiding for 70 years. Like yourself, I'm a true believer. What I need is your expertise.
You said if I ever put the pieces together that you would confirm.
And have you?
I've seen something.
You're nearly there. You're close.
I can't do this alone.
Yeah.
I'm here.
They police us and spy on us, tell us that makes us safer. We've never been in more danger.
And do something about it, Mulder.
I have seen this before. You're on fire, believing that you're onto some truth, that you can save the world.
This is my life. This is everything I believe in.
You are on dangerous ground here.
I know what I'm doing.
We have a small problem.
My name is Fox Mulder. Since my childhood, I've been obsessed by a controversial global phenomenon. Since my sister disappeared when I was 12 years old, and what I believe was an alien abduction.
My name is Dana Catherine Scully. I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a career I chose after medical school, which promised a chance to further my aim as a scientist and as a seeker of justice in a science-based world.
My obsession took me to the FBI, where I investigated paranormal science cases through the auspices of a unit known as the X-Files.
Soon after joining the FBI, I was asked to review the work of a fellow agent, Fox Mulder, and to debunk the X-Files, cases involving what my superiors regarded as science fiction and a waste of resources.
Through this unit, I could continue my work on the alien phenomenon and the search for my missing sister.
I quickly came to understand Mulder's work on the paranormal wasn't such as I'd been led to believe. That the X-Files were worthy of Mulder's investigations and of mine.
But now people only laugh, and only Roswell is remembered.
I would also come to fear that the institution I joined and invested with my trust was subject to the influence of dark forces outside the Bureau and sometimes within. Forces threatened by Mulder's work and increasingly by mine.
Are we truly alone? Or are we being lied to?
I was abducted from my home by unknown assailants and returned without a clear understanding why. But intervening incidents have led me to believe that during my short disappearance, I was subjected to tests resulting in a life-threatening disease. Its cure as mysterious as the illness itself.
In 2001, we had a child together.
William.
But had to put him up for adoption to hide him from those who wished him harm.
And the significance of a recent test result of my personal genetic makeup, turning up DNA anomalies that I can only classify as alien.
God. Alien technology being used against us by a venal conspiracy of men against humanity.
I didn't know how my work would be used.
They removed your unborn fetuses.
They do everything through here, even with the DNA.
Tell them about your DNA, Sveta.
I have alien DNA. For sure.
It's all part of a conspiracy dating back to the UFO crash at Roswell in 1947.
How can we help you, Mr. O'Malley?
I'm rattling some pretty big cages in the intelligence community, but I'm prepared to blow open maybe the most evil conspiracy the world has ever known.
You sent for me. I'm here.
You're witnessing what may be the advent of a global contagion.
To kill everyone but the chosen.
Alien DNA mixed with our DNA.
Testing yourself for alien DNA?
I sequenced my own genome because of my history and because we have a child together.
Scully, are you saying you have alien DNA?
I'm saying someone has to stop these sons of bitches.
Science given to them by an alien race.
Neither you nor I could save mankind from self-extermination. I just changed the timetable.
They police us and spy on us, tell us that makes us safer. We've never been in more danger.
And do something about it, Mulder.
What are they trying to do?
That's the missing piece.
Get to the hospital! Help is on its way, I promise!
But their fates were sealed since birth. They were simply puppets. The world will go on. Just in my image instead of God's. You see a seemingly weak man, but I'm the most powerful man in the world.
I want to prepare you for what you're about to see, Mr. Mulder.
Faraday cage? For what?
Do you know what an ARV is?
That's what you brought me here to see?
This is Garner. He'll walk you through the science.
That's an alien replica vehicle?
Given your background, I would have thought you'd seen one.
No, never. Not like that.
What we're showing you, we do at great risk. Colleagues have had labs burned to the ground and work destroyed by our own government. running on toroidal energy, so-called zero-point energy, simply the energy of the universe.
You're talking about free energy?
That we've had since the 40s.
No fuel, no flame, no combustion. Simple electromagnetic field. Technology kept secret for 70 years while the world ran on petroleum.
Oil companies making trillions.
What I'm going to show you next is the most unbelievable part.
Gravity warp drive, but how?
Element 115, Ununpenti.
Where did you get it? You said if I ever put the pieces together that you would confirm.
And have you?
I've seen something.
You're nearly there. You're close.
Yeah.
I'm here.
We have a small problem.
Discovery, your go for APU shutdown on time.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown, engines on. Check ignition and may God's love be with you. This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade, and the papers want to know whose shirts you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in a most peculiar way, and the stars look very different today, for here am I sitting in a tin can. Nothing I can do. I'm past 100,000 miles. I'm feeling very still, and I think my spaceship knows which way to go. Tell my wife I love her very much. She knows. Ground control to Major Tom. Your circuit's dead. There's something wrong. Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear? Am I floating on my tin can? Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown, engines on. Check ignition and may God's love be with you. This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade, and the papers want to know whose shirts you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in a most peculiar way, and the stars look very different today. For here am I sitting in a tin can, tell my wife I love her very much. She knows. Ground control to Major Tom. Your circuit's dead. There's something wrong. Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear? Floating round my tin can, far above the moon. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do.
Discovery, your go for APU shutdown on time.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown, engines on. Check ignition and may God's love be with you. This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade, capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in a most peculiar way, and the stars look very different today. For here am I sitting in a tin can, far above the world. Planet Earth is blue and there's nothing I can do. I'm past 100,000 miles. I'm feeling very still, and I think my spaceship knows which way to go. Tell my wife I love her very much. She knows. Ground control to Major Tom, your circuit's dead. There's something wrong, can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear? Am I floating round my tin can, far above the moon? Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do.
disclosure project. U-House disclosed, "We had meetings, and I ended up in a meeting with an alien. I called him J-Rod. Of course, that's what they called him. J-Rod was never mentioned by U-House in his interview, or by Melinda Leslie in hers. With thanks to the Desert Rat for this historical documentation." Some years ago, Bill sent me this hand drawing he made of J-Rod 1, as he himself became known as J-Rod 2. Note the skull, the hands, and long, strong fingers, and the alien's demeanor. This is not a proud but rather scared-looking being, huddled up in an army jacket. The alien's hands are strong and heavy-boned, with long, strong fingernails. Bill was to be seen wearing a logo with J-Rod 3 on it. Who or what this refers to remains unknown. Bill gave me this photograph of a pilot wearing a Gray's fake mask in the cockpit of a U.S. Air Force tank buster jet. This posed photograph reveals much about J-Rod. It shows it's an allowed U.S. Air Force picture of an alien on a U.S. Air Force base. It tells us we have aliens in our bases and we work with them, and they fly our craft and we do theirs. U-House is described in the Desert Rat with the codename J-Rod. J-Rod spent most of his career at the test sites, one of which appears to be in the Los Alamos laboratories in New Mexico. He does not talk about specific facilities, but does mention Area 51 as the test site in the interview that follows. U-House states directly that they want the leaks. They don't want to be caught out in the big lie. U-House mentions 4 types of aliens that he dealt with. One of them were the Greys. He describes their planets and their culture. Bill agreed to talk to me on camera, so we give you the entire Bill U-House interview on a late, sunny afternoon in December in eastern Nevada.
Well, it's
Bill, you can watch.
It's Bill U-House. Tell us what's going on, what's happening.
In what areas?
51 UFOs. What's happening down in the alien bases?
Alien down underneath.
Yeah.
Last September I gave a lecture up at Rachel, Nevada with Anthony Hilder. And of course Anthony was looking for certain information and asked me if I've ever been to, on the test site. And I had, but only on various different particular projects. They were small projects, but not for any extended period. So 3 weeks now, maybe a month, at intervals. But they were all on specific projects, not necessarily to do with flying saucers. There were some questions on the tunnels out there at the test site. And they questioned me whether I had been in tunnels, and I had been in tunnels. As far as the nuclear aspect is concerned, they have built tunnels for testing of various devices in certain mountains out there. And also they've drilled and exploded bombs, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 feet below the desert floor. But on a specific tunnel that I was in, you could fit 2 locomotives going in either direction, plus a center road with a tractor-trailer truck for hauling parts and stuff. I know that of only one tunnel that I've been in where we did some testing of a particular item, and this was about approximately 6 miles into the mountain. In a facility in that mountain that was specifically set aside for my group and my team. Those particular items that I worked on was basically technologically some science that was related to flying disc, but not necessarily for a flying disc. It was for a different project. There's so many different projects out there, and of course the facility that I worked at, that there's just too numerous to mention. Plus I can't identify code names, and I can't identify companies, although there are a number of different representatives from various different companies that are completely involved in this this alien technology and a transfer of technology for the new aircraft or the flying discs. In some cases, the Aurora, where they tested various different devices. In some cases, the F-117, where they had applied some of this technology for certain devices in the craft to more or less test them out, just like any other program that would test a new item out on something that we know how to fly, and it's a little bit different than a flying disc in that application.
So what are the latest technologies that they're using out there, the latest craft? You mentioned earlier about simulators.
I only had to do with simulators, and as you know, when they design a new craft or a company develops a new craft, there's always a simulator that's being built right alongside of the craft that they're going to fly. Whether it's the F-117 or the Aurora or any other new aircraft.
So are there alien discs out there?
Are there aliens out here at Area 51? I don't know of aliens out there at Area 51, no.
Are there areas that you prefer not to talk about them?
There are aliens that I know of in other facilities throughout the country, but not at Area 51. There could be. I'm sure there is.
What type of aliens would it be?
The aliens that they have, there's only a few that are here. They're the Greys, or the grayish, so to speak, that type of individual. I don't understand this case about the reptilians. I know that where these individuals come from, it's not set up like here on Earth where you have the different races, the Chinese, Japanese, and so forth. The difference in those particular individuals, they're on different planets. For example, you got in the Zeta Reticuli star system, there's a number of different planets there. There's Harlequin, there's Dorado, there's many others. For example, those particular individuals that are on each one of those planets do a different thing. They're not basically like we are set up here on Earth, okay? Well, I guess you could say that, for example, I'm talking about religion now, you got Buddhism, and you got the Mideast, Arabic, religions and so forth and so on. And you got the Catholics and so forth. It's not necessarily like that. It's they only have one religion, and it's not the same as we know it. Theirs is more or less a spiritual type religion. They don't have a church they go to. They don't go to church every Sunday. It's nothing specific like that.
So how does one know this?
How does one know that? Well, you have to go through a long period of I don't want to say acclimation, but it's a long period of understanding, and knowing what questions to ask, and trying to understand how I got it. Okay, because that information, a lot of it is like asking me what they eat, or what do they want from us, and that type of thing. And each one of those from those different planets could be different in what they really want from this planet. It could be like, I don't understand the abduction scenario. I don't understand the various different, so to speak, number of different aliens that are supposedly coming here. From what I understand, there's maybe only no more than 6 different species, if that, and not the 70 or 73 that John Laird talks about.
So what other facilities would the aliens
Mostly the facilities that are located in Arizona. The facilities that are located in Arizona, New Mexico.
Dulce?
Dulce? It's a possibility.
So you're being non-specific, but they are in other areas.
I don't know all of the areas. I've never been really underground to determine that. Okay, it's like I said, I was in one underground facility. It was out here at Area 50, not necessarily 51, but it was in.
Are they all the same area?
Well, if you went into the test site, you've got certain orders. You go to a certain location, and unless you know the facility, if you walked in there blindly like yourself, or they took you for a ride, you wouldn't know where you are on that test site.
There's nothing marked.
Unless you could tell which direction you were going. There's generally nothing marked. Which direction, or if you could track the miles, that you went from the time that you were able to see outside of a particular bus or a vehicle that you were in.
And you've flown in from...
I've flown in and I've driven in. So, to go into any of those facilities, in underground facilities, I know there's plenty of them, but how that happens, and who's got the responsibility or the authority to go in there is just, I was never privy to that information.
Essentially, what makes one think it's aliens, as opposed to just having a legitimate top secret base, which is underground, protect themselves from weapons?
Protect themselves from what?
Well, I mean, one would naturally assume that one's going to have secret bases. A, they're going to be secret, B, they're going to be underground, in case people...
Well, where's everything going nowadays? I don't care if it's in England or the United States, it's all going underground.
Do you know of any bases or heard of any bases in England?
Bases of aliens?
Yeah.
I have not necessarily heard of any particular bases just for the aliens.
Both? Yeah. Military.
I think you're looking at both. You're looking at whether they may be Englishmen or U.S. citizens or Germans, as far as working with those particular individuals. That I was never privy to. But you could probably assume that there are, and they're, like I told another gentleman, that to really get to see an alien, okay, if in the case where you've got the confidence level, that level of security, it takes like many years. It takes several years before you're even cleared to even get to that point. If you got a Q classification, you may get a certain level. You may go up to say 10 above Q, or you may go to 20, depending on the area or what your involvement is, okay, and how much they trust you. These organizations are run no differently than a particular government. You got in this facility, and I can't mention it. It's like one government or one country, but it's in a small area, and it's controlled like a country, but it's outside of the government. The top government officials, like Congress, senators, and so forth. There are probably senators and congressmen that know about this. The only ones that I've ever seen at the facility was, for example, Bush. Walking around with a number of different people, so I'm sure that he was very much involved in some way. He worked for the CIA for many years, or was, in charge of the CIA for many years, and being the vice president and president, so he knew what was going on. There are probably other people, that's involved, but mostly what you're going to find is in this, what I'm going to call is a separate country in a country, but only at a much smaller, scale,
so
on the above ground, where they have I don't even know if they call them president, chairman, or what, but they have names for them. And I'm sure there's people's names that are in the public limelight that, although they wouldn't say it, are probably tied or connected to these
What
groups.
about Bob Lazar, John Lear?
Bob Lazar, what he did, the reason why Bob Lazar was cleared was because of Teller. You know, a guy with that kind of clearance, it'd be pretty easy to get Bob Lazar in his facility. But, you know, and I can understand Bob going to the security. It's very degrading and you know, to the, if, for example, a young fellow like yourself going to security like that, it would be maybe embarrassing, maybe degrading, or you would, you know, maybe not say the same thing over and over, because you'll go to a number of psychologists before they even say, hey, you're okay. You know, and not knowing what each one's going to ask you, you know, you may not even tell us. You might forget or, you know, tell the story a little bit different, you know, and that'd kind of upset things. But what Bob Lazar's done in his demonstration of putting out this poster with these particular one craft that he called a sport model, from what I know, okay, it's fairly accurate.
So the model that you can buy in the shops, that Bob Lazar's marketing, is an accurate representation.
Well, it's an actual representative of what Bob Lazar knows and what he's seen at the test site.
So those discs are then man-made discs.
That may have not been a man-made disc. The only way I'd be able to tell if it was a man-made disc if I did see the avionics. The avionics and instrumentation, I don't know. You know, like I said, when you're building a simulator, it's got to parallel the craft, so that craft's going to have avionics in it that our science is familiar with, not alien science. Because for the simple reason is, an average the best pilots on Earth could not get into a alien craft and fly it, because they wouldn't know what they're looking at. They would understand the instrumentation. They wouldn't understand. They'd have to know what each particular box and each instrument in that flight deck, what it represented and what it did. You know, when you push certain buttons in it.
There's no way that we can communicate with the aliens to such a degree that we can understand their language and the way that things operate.
You got to understand. Transfer that technology, their science to our science. There are many people working on with the Greys, or whichever ones they are, to take that information and to write the procedures and to put it into information that's understandable to, say, a PhD that, you know, out of college, or a PhD that's supposedly understands our science. So they could take this information and maybe put it into some kind of design. It's just not that easy.
It's like learning Russian.
Well, learning Russian's it's a lot simpler because of their science and their technology is basically, you know, as far as the mathematics are concerned, is very similar to every other country. Okay, I don't think there's much difference in math here on Earth with the different nationalities. And
so have we shared their technology? Are they giving us new technology?
Let me say one thing. Does the United States allow or provide or sell F-117s to Japan or Russia or whatever? No. And the aliens, as far as they're concerned, they're giving us a model like a B-52, which is much older, okay? or they may give us some of their old F-4s, but it's a flying disc. So the latest technology we don't have. To us, it's fantastic because it's new. I don't understand all that. I just don't know.
You think that's bullshit? I think all that's bullshit.
No, the story I heard was that. Here's a little bit of the story I heard. On the number of crashes that happened, where they impacted the Earth, there was some that were dead, some that were alive. And what they noticed, and it took years for them or a few years, for them to finally say, hey, okay, we want to talk or we want to make contact with, certain humans. It was because of our humane way that we took care of the dead, and we, provided medical attention to the ones that were alive. There were a number of them that were alive that were hurt. And
that's the Roswell crashes. That's the Roswell crash.
I just don't know which crash. But this is the story that I got. So, it's just, it's no different than here on Earth. If we got a country that, their pilot crashed here, and he was alive, we help him out, give him medical facility. Well, we did the same thing. So
what was your special interest in all this? What brought you into this subject area?
That's a long story, Miles.
What's your profession?
I'm a mechanical design engineer, but it took a number of years before I knew what was to follow. It was, if you're recruited by I worked at Wright-Patterson. If you're recruited by, say, the government in some aspect or some area or some department, and you're going to work on something that's, say, a very high level of secrecy, you'll be doing things that you don't really understand why you're doing. Before I, even got involved in it, I was assigned to various simulator manufacturers. It's a matter, but what I'm just telling you or passing on this information is I've already passed this information on much earlier at a different group. But I had an okay from a certain individual to do this. Before I start talking or before I say anything, and I think quite a bit about what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it, if I hadn't gone back through my peers, I probably wouldn't say it. There's a number of different things I can't say. I can't give you code names. I can't give you individuals. I can't give you companies. I know there's a number of different companies, like I said, not necessarily from this country, but even your country that's involved in this whole scenario. Well, even the Russians, even before the Cold War stuff, they were involved to some extent.
So that would imply that they're releasing this information slowly to the public.
In a lot of ways, yes.
Does that pace
they know that the information is getting out. They know that they need certain people out there kind of smoothing the way. Like yourself.
Is that going to increase?
I think you'll see more of it. You'll hear about more of it. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you've looked at certain TV programs lately. You know how it is. It's like any other information. There's going to be leaks. They want the leaks. They want certain leaks, not everything. Depending on how they plan to really demonstrate or show that, hey, this is what's been happening. So they're not caught up in the big lie. They don't want to come out and say, hey, we've been doing this since 1947, we have these little dudes and that kind of. They don't want to do it that way. They want to still gain the respect of the population. How many million people in the world now have a feeling that UFOs are something of more than what's some of these wackos are talking about, right? You know, they call these ufologists a bunch of wackos, right? They were until, for example, you had some of these newscasters. Well, for one channel, ABC, NBC. And, you know, they did the UFO thing on the Russian sightings and stuff, and they said, you know, they finally said, hey, UFOs are real. And that's it.
So you got the Russians to say it was real first?
Yeah, the Russians said it. But we, you know, everybody keeps denying everything. And then, you know, a lot of people would deny, you know, me, right? I said, hey, we don't know this guy. It's like Bob Lazar, and I'm sure everything he's saying is true. I don't have any doubt, because I know the way that they work. You know, if you've got a security clearance, if you worked in that one facility, say if Bob Lazar worked out at this test site for 20 years, and say these security people had assigned particularly to him to monitor him, and that's the way they work it. They got security agents that are yours forever, and they monitor you and they put the reports in on you. It's not like this guy one day, this guy. It's not that way.
So they know how you work, how you think.
Sure.
Well, thanks very much. Have a happy time.
You got it. That was a little bit. I saw this gentleman maybe about once in a year that he'd come in. Now, whether it was him, I don't know, but looked the same to me. I didn't say, hey, J-Rod, how are you? That was. I've spent 10 years in the Marine Corps, 4 years working with the Air Force as a civilian, doing experimental testing on aircraft. Since my Marine Corps days, I was a pilot in the service and a fighter pilot, and fought in World War II after the latter part of World War II and the Korean War conflict. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I took a job with the Air Force at Wright-Patterson, doing experimental flight testing on various different modifications and tech orders that they had incorporated into aircraft, various different aircraft, F-89, back then the B-47, F-102, and those aircraft. While I was at Wright-Patterson, of course, I was approached by an individual that, and I'm not going to mention his name, to determine if I wanted to work in an area on just new creative things, okay? And apparently that was the flying disc simulator. What they had done, they had selected several of us, and they reassigned me to Link Aviation, which was a simulator manufacturer. At that time, they were building what they call the C-11B and F-102 simulator, B-47 simulator, and so forth. And they wanted us to get the experience before we actually started work on the flying disc simulator, which I spent 30-some years working on. The simulator wasn't actually functional until around 1958, where the simulator was actually operable. Craft that they used to build, which is a 30-meter one, was the one that crashed in Arizona, Kingman, Arizona, back in 53 or 52. I think it was 53. That's the one they used. That's the first one that they took out to the test site. It landed about 15 miles from, which used to be an Army air base, which is now a defunct Army base. I forget, I can't recall the name of But that particular craft, there were some problems with, number one, getting it on the flatbed to take it up to Area 51. They couldn't get it across the dam because of the road. It had to be barged across the Colorado River at the time, and then taken up to where people go now, up 93, out to Area 51, which was just being really constructed at the time, and taken down those dirt roads and out to that particular area of the test site. There were 4 aliens aboard that thing, and those aliens went to Los Alamos, and they put certain people in there with them, people that were astrophysicists, just general scientists, to ask them questions. The way the story was told to me was there was only one of them that would talk to any of these scientists that they put in the lab with them. Only one of the aliens. The rest wouldn't talk to anybody or, even have a conversation with them. First they thought, it was all, ESP or, what do I want to say?
Telepathy?
Yeah, mental telepathy. But, most of that is kind of a joke to me because they actually speak, maybe not like we do, but they actually speak and can converse, The difference between this aircraft or this disc and other discs that they had looked at was that it was much simpler design. In the simulator, there was one big thing different. The thing that, like Lazar calls the reactor, okay, we didn't have a reactor. We had a space in a thing that looked like the reactor, but that wasn't the thing we operated the simulator with. We operated with 6 large capacitors that were charged with 1 million volts each. Say there were 6 million volts in those capacitors. They're largest capacitors ever built. These particular capacitors, they last for 30 minutes, so you could get in there and actually work the controls and do what you had to get the aircraft or get the simulator, the disc operate. Okay. Actually, when it was operable, it would lift off the ball about a certain amount of there was a dimension there that we had that it actually lifted up, and it could actually turn, a certain amount of degrees left to right or whatever. In a simulator now, you'll notice that there are no seat belts, right? And the same thing with the actual craft, no seat belts. You don't need seat belts because when you fly one of these things upside down, there's no upside down like in a regular aircraft. You just don't feel it. You have your own gravitational field right inside. So if you're flying upside down, to you, you're right side up. There weren't any windows. The only place we had any visibility at all, and it was done with cameras or video type things at that time, was in the turret section. It takes a lot of time because of the area and the smallness of it. Just to raise your hand, it becomes complicated. You have to be trained with your mind, to accept what you're going to actually feel and
so there's some
experience.
Perceptual distortion.
There's a lot of distortion.
Yeah.
Seeing, just moving about. It's a. After a while, after you get used to it and all, and you do it, it's simple. You got to know where everything is, and you got to understand what's going to happen to your body. It's no different than, accepting the G-forces, when you're flying a aircraft or coming out of a dive, and that kind of thing. It's a whole new ballgame.
Did our flight crews ever take one of these discs out into space?
I don't know that. I don't really know that. I'm sure they have. I'm saying it probably took a while to train enough of the people or sufficient time. The whole big problem with this, with the disc, is that it's so exacting in its design and so forth, and it can't be used, say, with it can't be used as a like we use aircraft today with dropping bombs and you know, having machine guns, you know, in the wings and that kind of stuff. The design is so exacting that you can't add anything. You can't. It's got to be just right. There's a big problem in the design of where things are put. Say, you know, that where the center of the aircraft is and that type of thing. Even the fact that we raised it 3 feet so the taller guys could get in and stuff. The actual ship was extended back to its original configuration, but actually raised. We had a long period of introduction into meeting, you know, say an EVE, an alien. And I called him J-Rod. Of course, that's what they called him, but that wasn't his, you know, I don't know if that was his real name or not, but that's the name that the linguist gave him, you know. So he knew J-Rod, you know. And I did draw a sketch of him when he was, before I left him in a meeting, but, and I provided it to some people, but that was my impression of what I saw. He'd sound just like, if you spoke, he'd sound like you. You know, he's like one of the, you know, a parrot, you know, but he'd try and answer your question, you know. A lot of times you'd have a hard time understanding, you know, because if you didn't put it on paper and explain yourself, half the time he couldn't give you a good answer. Well, the preparation was, you know, basically going through. First of all, I went to all of the different nationalities in the world, right? Just, you know, these, whatever, you know.
Human nationalities.
Yeah, human nationalities, you know. Then they got into going into other forms of life, you know, even down to, you know, animals and that type of thing. And the fact that, you know, this J-Rod had, his skin was pinkish, but a little bit rough, you know, and that kind of stuff. Not, you know, not horrible looking, you know, or to me he didn't look horrible looking. Some of the guys, you know, that was in the particular groups that I was in, they never even made it, you know, as far as I was concerned. You know, when they gave you the psychological question, you know, I just answered them the way I felt, and I had no problem, you know. And that's what they wanted to know. You know, if you'd become, like, you know, hey, here's an alien, he's from here, and I don't know what, you know, one of those kind of things, you know. But it never bothered me, you know, it didn't amount to much.
So what kind of scientific advice he would give the crew that was building or back engineering these?
Basically, it was only engineering advice or science advice. You know, say for example, I performed the calculation, and there's I spoke of a book that, it's not a book, it's a big assembly of various different divisions of on gravitational technology, okay? And the key element in there, all the information wasn't there, because even our guys, our people that were the top mathematicians and stuff, couldn't figure some of this stuff out. So we would take it, and then, you know, we'd have to, with each design, you know, there's a requirement for calculations. And we'd have to prove by calculations, you know, that this thing's going to operate. No different than anything else we do. And sometimes you get into a spot where you try, and even if you use the formulas to come up with this thing that they'd provide you, it wouldn't work. And that's where he'd come in, you know, to tell him to look at this and see what we did wrong. the last 40 years or so, or 60 years, maybe there's, I'd say 40 years anyway, not counting the simulators, I'm talking about actual craft, there's probably maybe 2 or 3 dozen, various different sizes.
That we've built, or that we have that
we built.
Okay.
I don't know much about the ones that, you know, that they brought here. I know about that one out of Kingman, but that's about it. And I know the company that hauled it out of there and who's out here now. A couple of different versions that they used. One was a chemical version. One was a solid version. And I don't even know the chemistry of the chemical version. But there's one that operates with under chemicals, with certain chemicals. Actually, what they've done with, I think, with these triangles that people have seen is they've got like 2 or 3 of, say, 30-meter crafts that are in the center of it. And the outside perimeter, you know, you could put anything you want as long as these particular ones meet the design criteria. And they'll operate. Then it's more or less all that other stuff on the outside is tag along. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure if they put a large weapon up there and fired it, it would probably, you know, not work. Or they'd kill themselves. There are certain reasons for the secrecy. I could understand that, no different than, you know, the first atomic bomb that they built. But, you know, they're getting so far ahead now with aircraft design, and people have come up and they're visualizing and seeing some of the design aspects that are put in some of the aircraft today. And eventually, I'm saying, like I told you gentlemen earlier, that 2003, most of this stuff will be out in everybody's plate to look at. Maybe not the way that everybody expects it, but in some manner they determine appropriate, you know, to show everybody, hey, look at what we got.
So
you
think
big surprise.
You think this is the year 2000 that we're doing this interview? So you think within 3 years that the public will be told something?
I said this years ago, 2003. And the reason why I said that, the document I signed ends in 2003.
And you're not the only one that signed.
And I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
See, this I call it FOGIT, or that's what they call it, fundamentals of gravitational, you know, techniques basically. But it's a volume. Now, I'm sure that manual now is just expanded. We're no different than anything else that they build for design criteria, because anything we do today, we have to have a design criteria manual, you know, and they put all the information in that. And if you ever get one of these volumes of these documents, you'd be on top of the world.
Kaufman. Mr. Kaufman was assigned to a special military intelligence unit at Roswell in 1947.
Well, Don, let me first explain that in the 1940s, this base, Roswell Army Airfield, was one of the most important bases in the entire Air Force because of the many varied activities that going on here. We had the Norden bomb site here. It was one of the training bases for the 509th Bomb Group, which dropped the atomic bomb on Japan. And the fact, too, that you had experimental work going on at White Sands, and also highly secretive work going on at Los Alamos in the northern part of the state. So you could see that this was a hotbed of activity. It was one of the hottest places in the entire world. Well, in June of 1947, our radar people stationed at White Sands noticed a series of erratic movement of blips. And on the night of July the 4th, we were watching the blips. I think it must have been about 11 p.m. There was severe thunderstorm and heavy rain going on into the entire area. The screen lit up. the radar man just couldn't quite make out just what was wrong. Maybe there was something wrong with the radar screen, but he was told that it was in working order. So he came to the conclusion that something went down east of White Sands, where he did not know. So in the meantime, we were in constant communication with White Sands, with Roswell Army Airfield, with the base commander here, and also the intelligence officer. And we were ordered back to the base. And on our way back, we were still in radio communication. What called our attention that something went down north of Roswell is that people driving on U.S. Highway 285, north going south, noticed an orange ball falling towards Earth. Well, it was common in those days to call the base and tell them that something unusual would happen. So as we got back to the base, in the meantime, Major Easley, the provost marshal, sent some MPs out on 285 to locate where this orange ball actually fell to Earth. And they noticed this orange glow off the highway, about maybe 15 miles inside, off the highway. And when we arrived back to the base, we were told to go out there, and we had searchlights and what have you, to the area. We had to clip some wire fences, get into the area. And what we saw at that time was just unbelievable. It wasn't one of our crafts. We know what they look like. But what we saw was a craft of unknown origin.
That I can only classify as alien.
How do you keep something secret? You hide it in plain sight.
July 8, 1947. The flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If you look at the document sent to J. Edgar Hoover, 3 so-called flying saucers had been recovered in New Mexico. It has become the #1 document viewed on the FBI website.
There have been ET visitation, and people have been attempting to conceal this knowledge.
We actually did recoveries of bodies that were involved with some of these crashes.
I said, well, you're going to tell the public about it? And he says, no, we don't tell the public about this.
There began to be this bifurcation, this separation between legitimate national security and military operations and the deep black programs that are unacknowledged. If people think that it's just the UFO issue, they're gravely mistaken.
This is one of the ultimate secrets that needs to be exposed.
If there was a project that was illegal, the president doesn't know it's occurring, who's going to stop this from happening?
The moon of Mars. There's a very unusual structure. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there?
These deeper black programs have the technology to hoax an alien invasion. They could do it, and they could do it in a way that's 100% believable.
It's very easy to set up a false flag operation, concoct all kinds of false information. They have people embedded in all the major media to change and affect stories. If you tell anyone about this project, this bullet has your name on it, and it will find you.
The strategy was that first the Russians were the enemy, then terrorists would be identified, then third world country crazies. The last card is the alien card, and all of it is a lie. A lie.